Welcome all to the Religious Forum of the Rome Med Dialogue that this year is entitled Human Fraternity and Inclusive Citizenship and is organized by ISPI, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs, in partnership with an important Mediterranean and interreligious actor, Adian Foundation. My name is Fabio Petito, and I'm the head of the Religion and International Relations program. This is a program, the result of a collaboration now 10 years long between ISPI and the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, in particular, its policy planning unit. And I think this forum is a testimony of the success of this collaboration, because we have been able to embed consideration of the religious factors in the discussion of Italian and international foreign policy making, and because we have been able to give a place to religious actors to the global policy table discussion as this one, because there is a recognition that there are significant opportunities for government and international organizations to engage with religious actors in achieving common policy objectives such as human rights, peace building, and sustainable development. This is an important achievement, and allow me to express all my gratitude to the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and in particular, give me the opportunity to salute the director of his policy planning unit, Armando Baruch, who has been supportive in fostering this important agenda, and now that is going to move in the coming weeks to the southern shore of the Mediterranean as ambassador to the Kingdom of Morocco. I'm sure he will move to think about the strategic role of religion to the practice of religion and interreligious dialogue as part of the important Italian policy in this important country of the South. But most of all, I'm extremely grateful for the presence of Honorable Emanuela Del Rey, the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of the Italian government, for her presence, and even more for her constant support and leadership on this agenda of the role of religion and interreligious engagement in foreign policy. It's not surprising because Emanuela has a distinguished career as a scholar of religion and interreligious dialogue, as well as a practitioner of interreligious engagement in many different parts of the world. And without further ado, I'd like Emanuela Del Rey to give some opening remarks to open up our forum. Emanuela, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Fabio. I also want to thank you for your tireless engagement in these particular issues, which are really fundamental and crucial, especially in these current times, in which we are facing challenges that we really didn't even imagine only a few months ago we would be facing in such a very tragic way. Of course, I have to say that the topic of this seminar, as usual, when we talk about religion, is absolutely fundamental, because we know that overcoming religious barriers, discrimination, persecution is a way of building inclusive and peaceful societies. It is true. We know that experiments all over history have demonstrated that when there is a peaceful coexistence, mutual recognition, and let's say different minorities, especially religious minorities, find a balance and an equilibrium in the way they share social spaces, economic spaces, and political spaces, there is the opportunity to create stable societies and more importantly, peaceful societies. Of course, we know that nowadays the issue of interreligious dialogue and freedom of religion or belief is fundamental in many areas. I wouldn't circumscribe this problem only to a specific area, because we know for a fact that this is something that is spread all over the world. Of course, there are areas in which this kind of situation, in which the violation of the rights of different minorities and, let's say, the way the society approaches the rights of individuals and communities to enjoy religious freedom or freedom of belief is definitely defining, in some cases of extreme conditions, even the sparing of wars, and also, of course, the development of conflicts that are difficult to solve. I can tell you that as regards Italy in particular, of course, Italy is engaged in this kind of activities, especially to favor constructive attitudes towards freedom of religion and freedom of belief in many different ways. We are always committed to promote freedom of religion of belief, and this is also part officially of our current mandate in the Human Rights Council, because we absolutely believe that we need to promote this attitude in the most important international fora, and also, of course, every time we engage in bilateral relations with the so-called third countries that luckily enough nowadays we call partners, and also through our development cooperation programs. We are engaged in all multilateral fora, I said, because multilateralism for us is a strategy. It's a correct political attitude to approach all human issues. We are active in the Human Rights Council as well as in the United Nations General Assembly, in the OSCE, in the Council of Europe, in the European Union. We always promote resolutions and initiatives on this particular subject. And also I can tell you all that we are also proud to co-sponsor the resolution that in 2019 led to the establishment of the International Day commemorating the victims of acts of violence based on religion or belief. I want to also recall the fact that during 2018, the Italian OSCE chairmanship promoted the actions towards the fighting against all forms of discrimination and intolerance, hosting two complementary international conferences in Rome on the fight against anti-Semitism and on the fight against intolerance and discrimination on a religious basis, with a focus on Christians and Muslims in particular. Italy also, of course, provides humanitarian assistance to religious minorities in situations of particular vulnerability, I would say in this case, mainly in the Middle East, through interventions, amongst other things, aimed at helping displaced populations and promoting reconciliation between the different ethnic and religious groups involved in conflicts. Since last year, I also want to mention the fact that Italy has set up a fund specifically dedicated to support Christian minorities persecuted in crisis regions. The fund of about 4 million euros for the first 2 years, 2019 and 2020, will also be able to cover interventions aimed at promoting peaceful coexistence and dialogue between different religious communities. Of course, you have mentioned the planning, the policy planning unit of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation. It is a very important body because it supports and collaborates on several projects and initiatives on interreligious dialogue and the impact of religion on international relations. This year, because we are here in this particular situation related to dialogues, I want to say that we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the ISP Ministry of Foreign Affairs collaboration on initiatives specifically related to the role of religion in foreign policy. Of course, our cooperation, as is demonstrated today, has been absolutely excellent on the research side, which is absolutely fundamental, and also on the side of the events. I also want to tell you that Italy has supported the creation of the European Academy of Religion, which is a platform for dialogue between universities, research centers, and institutions from Europe and beyond. It's absolutely fundamental to support the European Academy of Religion, because it really constitutes a network committed to support all sorts of activities, academic, interdisciplinary, to promote mutual understanding and respect amongst the community from different religious backgrounds. We are also supporting the Foundation for Religious Sciences. I see familiar faces here. And I can tell you that this will also be important for the organization of the next G20 Interfaith Forum under the Italian presidency of the G20 in 2021. I want to remind you also that we've been involved in the La Pira Library in Palermo, which was really built up with our contribution. And also, I want to say that we are also part of the Transatlantic Policy Network on Religion and Diplomacy, which brings together diplomats from Europe and North America. The first meeting was in 2015. To conclude, I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you regarding my previous experience and what I have learned from my life with religious minorities, and also fighting with them for their rights and for the recognition of their identity, especially, and their political position in society. Of course, I can tell you that I strongly believe that there has been a step forward in interreligious dialogue. We have gone from interreligious dialogue being a reparative action to being, in most cases, especially the ones that I have studied carefully, a proactive policy, which allows really something that can be constructed and not simply repaired. Of course, the challenge nowadays, and I'm sure we will discuss it together in this seminar, is to avoid in the ideological interpretations and the exploitations of the actions of interreligious dialogue. It is a very high risk at the moment, because especially with COVID-19, while COVID-19 is promoting unifying principles, promoting a different narrative in which we actually take into account the fact that we are all interconnected and that we are all interdependent. In fact, there are many parts that are working to promote an opposite concept of identity based on religion that aims at vanifying all that we are achieving now, all these unifying principles. This is a very high risk that probably we are underestimating. I think that these counter narratives are very vicious and are incredibly dangerous. Also become from those who often come from those who we consider friends and allies. We must not be satisfied by our achievements and let not our guard down. Because in order to be solid, our achievements need to be pervasive, and barriers must be made to collapse because they are erected every single day in a vicious way, as I just mentioned. Dialogue means shared reforms in current times, and interreligious dialogue means shared reforms, principle-based, mutual recognition and understanding. I strongly believe in this because I think that this is the proactivity that interreligious dialogue can really take in its sense now, in a moment in which we have a huge responsibility, because as I said, the danger is hidden, but it's working every single day. In the interreligious dialogue, proactivity is the ability to get through to the communities and to the inner self of their members in a way like no other can. And this is why we must really be conscious of its potential, but also be conscious that the way we use it is absolutely fundamental. And therefore, we have a huge responsibility again. We must live in contemporary times. And contemporary times are urging us to act correctively. So I really want to thank you. I wanted to share some ideas with you from the Italian government and also from my personal experience. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Emanuela. You really created the condition now for us to enter our roundtable discussion of the first panel on human fraternity and interreligious engagement for peaceful and inclusive society. When, together with my friends from ADIAN, we sit down to think about the content of our conversation, we started from this recognition that the growing polarization and intolerance involving religion as well is posing in some way comparable challenges in the north and south of the Mediterranean, of course in different forms because of the very different context. But in any case, there is a great deal of othering going on from new forms of nationalism, populist politics, discrimination, and violent extremism. The fundamental freedoms, like freedom of religion or belief, but also freedom of expression, are under assault in multiple ways. And the current pandemics seem to have made things even worse. Now, against this gloomy background, however, we thought that there are seeds of hope that have emerged from a number of high-profile intervention of religious leaders committed in the very name of their theologies and the social ethics of their traditions to foster human fraternity, to achieve inclusive and peaceful society and respecting religious and cultural pluralism. So we have a fantastic set of speakers to discuss this topic. What I had in mind very strongly was the unprecedented meeting last year between Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of al-Azhar, Ahmad al-Tayyeb, and their document on human fraternity as the starting point of asking us a series of two questions, really. In this troubled context, are we on the cusp of a different era of interreligious dialogue and collaboration, a more effective, practical one? And can these new narratives of human fraternity and inclusivity, including inclusive citizenship, can they actually be concrete political projects that can help us to navigate these troubled times and face these huge challenges that we are facing? Now, to help us with this topic, we have an extremely great panel. Very briefly, they don't need huge and long presentation. We have Naila Tabara, which is the co-founder and vice president of the ADIAN Foundation. We have Mohammed Abdel Salam, the Secretary General of the Committee for Human Fraternity and former advisor of the Grand Imam of al-Azhar. We have Andrea Zoulet, the advisor to the King of Morocco and very well-known public intellectual with a distinguished career. And finally, last but not least, we are honored to have the Archbishop of Marseille, Jean-Marc Aveline. So I'd like Naila to ask you to start with your reflection on this topic, please.
Thank you very much, Fabio, for this introduction. I would also like to thank Emanuela Del Re for what she, for her talk, for the differentiation between reactive dialogue and proactive dialogue, and also for telling us that the way forward is shared reforms and principle-based. Maybe, okay, it's fine. Maybe from her word, I think that also she is calling us to consider dialogue not as a harmonious model, but as a transformative model. And I think this has been happening with what we've seen last year, as you've said, that that image, that moment of the declaration of the Human Fraternity document with Pope Francis and Sheikh Ahmad al-Tayyeb, it was a symbol of a moment, but behind it there is also years and years of documents that come from the Catholic Church or from al-Azhar specifically, going into the direction of public issues and public life values. We have from of course, the Catholic social teaching, but also we have from al-Azhar documents since 2011, focusing on freedoms, including religious freedom, focusing on citizenship and equality and diversity, and inclusion also. So with this document, the Human Fraternity document, it brings them together, co-signed by both, and is again putting the emphasis on social issues, but also on political issues. It talks about citizenship, it talks about freedom of expression, of action, of belief, and of practice. It talks about equality. It's an inclusive document that doesn't only talk about Christians and Muslims, but talks also about all the people of good faith, opening thus, showing us the way that when we are talking about these principles, or when we are acting about for these principles, we can act together regardless what our background is, as long as we are believing in those values. And of course, also including some points that face some of the issues that we are witnessing now. For example, that God doesn't need to be defended, but that we need to defend the rights and the dignity of the poorest and the most marginalized people. So after this moment, after this very symbolic moment that comes as a culmination of a reflection happening already in both in Christianity and in Islam, what next today? How can we promote this on the ground and amongst the grassroots? The problem is that sometimes these documents are not well known enough by people, or even not accepted by people because they don't relate yet to them. So how do we get them to relate to grassroots? This is the question. We have been working in Adyan Foundation on courses, on documents to include in religious education, on those values of public life, on online messages through a platform that we have that is called Ta'dudiya, that reaches around 8 million people in the Arab world, with those messages of pluralism, of citizenship, inclusive citizenship, freedom of religion or belief, and these issues. And we are partnering with many of you present here to work on this promotion more, and hope to be partnering soon also with the Committee of Human Fraternity for this promotion. We're also working on a charter of inclusive citizenship in Arab countries, and this is more on a policy level. But I think what we need to reflect all on is how to promote this transformative model, how to focus our religious discourse and especially the religious dialogue on those public life values, and get that to reach the grassroots. I will stop here. Thank
you very much, Naila. And I'd like to pass to Your Excellency Advisor Mohammed Abdel Salam, which of course has very much was at the center of the Declaration of Human Fraternity. Your Excellency, please, the floor is yours. Well,
do you hear me now?
Yes,
in the name of God. Thank you so much to our friend Fabio, and I have to thank all of you, and it's a pleasure to be here in this group. And I would like even to thank Azza Karam wa Katiba wa Naila Kubara to the good speech that she make. I would like to start thanking Mrs. Emanuela and all the organizers of this public meeting, because we are going to speak about a theme that is a topic that is very central now, even if it's a little bit difficult. We know that the situation is very difficult now, so we need to meet, and we know that we cannot meet in person now. We cannot even work together in a good way in order to choose our way forward. But I think that after this epochal change that happened from Imam al-Tayyeb and Pope Francis, that did this huge work together, and we know that the Mediterranean basin is really important and central in human culture, because it has been the cradle of culture and history. So we have seen that the people have crossed this sea several times in the history, and so now today, do you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you. Yes. Okay, great. Now we can see you as well. Welcome again.
Do you see me?
Yes.
Okay. Still see me?
You have disappeared again.
Okay. I will change something. Sorry.
Yes.
I'm reading what I wrote, but I would like to speak in a with my heart. So I'm not going to read. I'm going to send this text to you, but I'm going to speak normally. I heard what you have been speaking about now. Fabio was presenting some good questions at the beginning, so we have to start with a good dialogue. And I think that a dialogue could be a political project that can be discussed by states in order to become a huge human force. I just would like to add an important thing from my point of view. We know that the fraternity document that had been signed, it's very important. This is the first time that happens in the history. It's a symbol. It's one of most important symbols of Islam. Is meeting with one of most important persons in Christianity, and they are agreeing on the principles, and they are signing on these principles and just spreading those. And I think that 4th of February 2019 will be a day that we are going to remember in the future. I think that now we have to move from dialogue to the cooperation between religions in order to save humanity. And it's not only connected to Islam and Christianity, it's something related to humanity as a whole. I think that Imam and the Pope had been speaking to all people, even non-believers. This is a very important point. It's a changing point. A few days ago, happened something very important in my point of view, and it's a very strong step about humanity. And when those two persons, the Pope and the Imam, on 1:30, just used at the same time the social networks, the Imam of al-Azhar and the Pope of Roman Church were speaking both about the importance of a common project for humanity. So the Imam, the Sheikh of Azhar, and the Pope were speaking together against terrorism and about extremism, and they spoke about the danger of terrorism and about extremism. I think that this meeting is one turning point as well, is an important turning point in the common work for human forces. I think that from 1 year, somehow we are you are suffering of coronavirus, and this is producing some new very bad phenomena as the discrimination of people on the basis of this virus, and even on migrants. So we have seen in last days that the vagina is very near, and so we are less less in danger, I hope, and I think that the Imam and the Pope are going to speak about this as well, and I think that they are going to say that we need to give the medicines, the vaccine, even to the people that have no economical power to get it. So we have to avoid that some people will not be able to take this health and to take these drugs in order to, and this is even due to the wars. So we need to deliver this message, and it's very important that the distribution of the cure for coronavirus has to be distributed to the whole world, and this is and we know that the G20 that had been held in Saudi Arabia recently, it has been taken a very important decision to take about 20 million of doses of the vaccine for coronavirus, and it has been it has been mentioned even by Mohammed al-Suleiman about the importance of a fair distribution of this cure, and even Sheikh al-Azhar and the Pope of Rome spoke about that, and it's very important to take care of the fragile people like refugees and migrants, and this is important things for the believers. So to our brothers and sisters that are listening, I think that this decision that has been taken by the G20 tell us that the world after Corona cannot be a better world without human fraternity, without a real and non-hypocritical solidarity. We are in need to choose fraternity, to choose integration, and to avoid any discrimination. And I would like to thank Italian Republic and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for giving us opportunities like this, and it's one of the initiatives that have been taken by Italian government on this theme, on this topic, and the interfaith dialogue is very important to us all. And I remember that even through the embassy in Cairo, they made even a meeting about the freedom of expression, the freedom of faith, and how can we find the better way to translate the principles, the religious principles and religious freedom principles in laws, in order even to involve civil society organization and to go together to work toward human fraternity. So I think that Italy has a great role in this, and it's playing a very good and important role in order to promote fraternity, and it's an honor for me, and I have been honored to meet Pope Francis and the President of Italian Republic with other representatives of other religions in Sant'Egidio in Sant'Egidio organization. It has been an opportunity to work together side to side, and I would like to say it very clearly. I'm in the Commission for Human Fraternity, and this commission that had been made during the meeting between Pope Francis and the Imam of al-Azhar, and I think that we work for you and with you, and we believe that as the Pope asked and the Imam and the Sheikh asked, that we have to work together. We cannot find the fraternity alone. We should work together between all the people that loves peace and coexistence, and we should work on this way together. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. and I'm ready to work together. Thank you again very much.
Thank you very much, and I will turn now to His Excellency Advisor, Monsieur Azoulay.
Yes. Yes, first of all, thank you to the ASP and my dear friends of ADN for having me with you this afternoon. And as it was suggested by our moderator, Professor Petito, and by Naila, I will try to be as concrete as possible to tell you what does it mean to speak about religious dialogue in our daily lives, especially in my country, Morocco, in Islam, and in a country where, I mean, the diversity is key. And I want to just share with you what was my last weekend on this topic. I just came back yesterday night from my hometown, Essaouira, Mogador, where I presided a ceremony for the launching of school curriculum, university curriculum, to give a chance to my fellow Muslim compatriot to know what was the long history, deeply rooted legacy and heritage, Jewish heritage in Morocco. I'm more than 3,000 years myself as a Moroccan Jew. Judaism arrived in Morocco 7 centuries before GC, which means close to 1,000 years before Islam. And speaking about Islam and Judaism in my country is not something which is just a detail. It's part of our legacy. And until now, there was no program, no manuals, no books telling the Moroccan people what was Judaism in their own country. They didn't know that their DNA was also nursed, forged by Judaism. But a few years ago, in July 2011, we voted by a very large majority our new constitution, which mentioned in its foreword that Morocco by today, as a Muslim country, was built by the Amazigh Berber civilization first, then by the Jewish civilization, and later on by the great Arabo-Muslim civilization. It was said in the constitution, it was written in the constitution, and it was in Islam. It was in an Arab country. And it was a major breakthrough, which gives to us the legitimacy and the ability and the capacity to try to leverage in the daily life for the largest public possible by starting in education that it was possible in the past, it was a reality in history, and it was deeply rooted in the mindset of millions of Moroccans, but it was not in the educational system. And fortunately, and thanks to the leadership of His Majesty the King Mohammed VI, now the children, the colleges, the universities have started this weekend to work on those curricula, telling to the Moroccan the Jewish part of their identity, of their culture, of their history. And it was, again, in a Muslim country. And you cannot imagine the impact in the Moroccan civil society, NGOs, think tanks, medias, all along those last 3-4 days. And I just want to tell you that this step was, telling all of us what we can do in this period, in this very, very gloomy time, not only because of the COVID, but in a time where denial, clash, frilosity are, spoiling all of us, all the countries, north, south, east, west. In this denial time, we are sending this signal. We are sending this signal, and it's not top-down. It's top-down, bottom-up, and open to all. And let me just add one, if I have 1 minute more. Let me mention that by last January 15, again in Essaouira, my hometown, which was the only city I know in Islam from Morocco to Indonesia where Islam do agree to have a Jewish majority, which is very rare, as you know. And the king, Mohammed VI, came to inaugurate an historical building, restored 18th century building, with one of the 40 synagogues who do exist in the Mogador in the 19th until the 20th century, early 20th century. One of the synagogues was restored, and in the same building was created what we named a Beit Dakira, which means the memory house. And upstairs, we have also built the first international study center to revisit relation between Judaism and Islam, to revisit by restarting on the two holy books, the Quran and the Torah, with a different vision, a different reading, a different goal. Because again, the two holy books and all the holy books were so badly instrumentalized and also spoiled in their real meaning. And now we have, again in Morocco, a study center with partnership all over the world, from America, Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, to work together for a different reading and to try just to give the best and the largest chances possible to education. It is a key word, and it is by education that, in my view, religious dialogue, religious legitimacy, religious call on all could be produced and help to find a way out to this situation we are confronted to by now.
Thank you very much, Monsieur Azleh. Your Excellency, Archbishop Avelin, what do you think about this conversation?
Thank you. I would like to thank the Italian Institute for International Political Studies and, of course, Allian Foundation for giving me the opportunity to take part to this very important debate. Excuse me, because I'm going to read my text because my English is so bad, so I prefer to write what I would like to share with you. I am Archbishop from Marseille in France, And I am talking to you today because I've been working on interreligious teams for almost 30 years now. And because the city where I hold my office is a place where believers from different religions are numerous and constitute a large number of numerous communities in Marseille. Before answering the question on a more systematic way, I would like to share with you some examples from the real life that can be relevant for our discussion. First, you know that France has been mourning after recent terror attacks in a school in Paris and in a church in Nice. A few days later, I received at the Archbishopric a group of 21 imams of the town of Marseille who asked to see me to present their condolences and to give me flowers. And it was a very, very big moment. The second example, a few days later, a Muslim high school in Marseille took the initiative to organize a minute of silence together with a Catholic high school facing it in the same street. It was very simple, but for me, very relevant. And finally, third example, for some years now, an annual meeting in Marseille of Christian and Muslim families takes place in a park, 300 persons, where children play during the day, adults prepare a meal, everybody enjoys time together, and even pray together at the end of the day. And it's for me a very, I enjoy to be with them. I enjoy. And this last experience shows the relevance of meeting the other concretely on concrete problems of the ordinary life. The three preceding show the importance of fraternity lived together. Little things, but very important, because at the level of interpersonal relations, I think that we need text and forums like now, but we need above all concrete relationships in ordinary life. So now I will try to ask our common question, and I can say that I observed during these 30 years a shift in interreligious cursor. The first period, which could coincide with the pontificate of St. John Paul II. In this period, the experience of meeting the other and the interrogations raised for the faith of each were important. It's the time of the great encounter in Assisi, and this theological moment was important because it raised the question to the faith of each believer about the serious consideration of the existence of the other and its legitimacy to the pretension of truth. There was a second period which could coincide with the pontificate of Benedict XVI, where the question of freedom was vivacious: religious freedom, freedom of conscience, freedom of worship. This other historical moment was important, especially in the exchange of documents written after the pontiff addressed in Regensburg in 2006. And the third period, initiated with the pontificate of Francis, and urges fraternity as a challenge against polarization and discrimination. So first, dialogue as a theological and spiritual issue. Second, dialogue as a diplomatic and international item about freedom. And third, dialogue as an horizon of concrete collaboration for human fraternity. So it seems to me that a new era of interreligious dialogue with this third period can begin if and only if it does not forget the two precedings. It seems to me that the three moments are not chronological moments, but logical moments. which are at the heart of a new kind of interreligious dialogue: faith, freedom, fraternity together. Because fraternity is foremost a remedy in these troubled times only if it has its origin in a personal and spiritual conversion, and fraternity can only be lived in religious freedom is assured. All in all, in this polarized world, a new kind of interreligious dialogue is possible if it's based on faith, freedom, and fraternity. And at this only condition can it help build peace. I remember what said the French Cardinal Torrent a few years ago when he was a president of the Pontifical Council for Interreligious Dialogue. He said, religious pluralism can be considered as a mysterious purpose of God, whose signification evades our intelligence. I think we have to take together these three logical moments of the theme of dialogue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Archbishop. I think this helps us to move to the second round, where unfortunately I will ask you to be a little bit brief because we have also a second set of panelists. And really, I want to start from what the Archbishop was saying. When I read the Human Fraternity Declaration, what struck me was this emphasis on a common positive vision of solidarity. However, also a strong emphasis on the issue of freedom struck me. There was a lot of emphasis that if we are brothers and sisters, we need to treat us with respect and respect each other's freedom. Freedom of course, belief, thought, consciousness, but also the need to develop as a result inclusive and full form of citizenship. I just want to read you, and I quote from this document: "It is therefore crucial to establish in our society the concept of full citizenship and reject the discriminatory use of the term minorities, which engenders feelings of isolation and inferiority, and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against." So I was struck because my question to you is, so can really this new interreligious narrative of human fraternity help to build these new forms of inclusive citizenship, which seems to be needed both in the south and the north of the Mediterranean shore because of the trouble that the issue of religion and religion pluralism is involving our society in? And how do you assess this shift from the idea of minorities that needs to be protected to these new forms of inclusive citizenship? Can this perhaps be also include some danger, some risk? Perhaps Naila, do you want to start with that?
Sure, thank you. And so I start with your last question. And I think what we protect and what we want to protect is social cohesion. And what we want to protect is diversity, is human dignity, it's justice, and the common good. These are the things that we want to protect. So I think that I agree with the discourse that is shifting from talking about protecting minorities to protecting rights related to diversity, especially freedom of religion or belief, and rights of also cultural diversity. So because here we are protecting communities, but we are not leading them to ghettoization. What I'm afraid of sometimes, although some people prefer to use the term minority to say we need to focus on these groups to get their rights, but also sometimes it would lead to some sort of ghettoization. It would lead to even like in confessionalism and sectarianism, and even as we have in Lebanon, for example, what we have the corruption that was fed by the clientelist system, because it's like closed systems. So focusing more on freedoms So freedom of religion or belief, for instance, is more important in my view. It leads us, it helps us more in this regard, as long as we are working on the side of it to work for inclusive citizenship and promoting social cohesion at the same time. But I think also that sometimes we talk about rights and we don't talk enough about what inclusion really means. So first, I would go maybe for a discourse that doesn't talk about minorities, but talks about inclusive citizenship, but on the condition that as we perceive inclusive citizenship in Adyan, this is a space where we really talk and dare to talk about the issues that we need to face. So not to have it as a superficial umbrella where we're saying everything is fine. No, it's an umbrella. What we're saying, let's see together where things are not fine. Where are people's rights not where are people being discriminated against? Be they part of groups that are smaller, be they non-religious, be they part of religions that are non-recognized, etc. So where are their rights discriminated against? What laws do we have that do not promote inclusive citizenship? But then also focus on what can promote this. So how to integrate all the different components of society in culture, in education, as Monsieur Azoulay just said. It's in all levels, how to integrate other in religious discourse too. So we cannot move directly to solidarity without getting the other integrated in our discourse, in our religious discourse, in our education, and the feasts that we have, the holidays that that we have, and all of those cultural symbols around us. These are, for me, steps that we need to have in parallel. So on the one hand, rights and work together as religions against discriminatory rights and for the freedom of all. I think this would be a criteria of really the authenticity of what we are saying, and also work together for the inclusion of all.
Thank you, Naila. Mr. Abdel Salam. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Mr. Fabio. So Naila had answered in a very good way on this point. One thing that I would like to stress when we speak about the Baba, the Pope, and the Sheikh of al-Azhar, when they spoke about minorities, they told us that we should not use this word to divide people. Using always this word about minorities, it's something that had been discriminatory in the past. Even the small people, the young people, the youth, in those societies, just they start speaking about themselves as minorities. So we should use this word very carefully, because it has become really dangerous. And so, because people may face the choice between being isolated or integrated within the society because of this idea of minorities, for example. So people should aspire to have the same rights of the whole people and the majority, as part of the majority. So it has been a pleasure to speak with you about this theme. I think that we, in this moment, this is a very important moment of our history, in order to focus our work about education, as Mr. Zuley spoke, and even Naila told us about this. For example, when we speak about Human Fraternity Declaration, we know that in each religion we have some extremists, we have even some we have some people in Islam that are extremists, speaking about the Pope, about Christianity, about Jewish people. In this Human Fraternity Declaration, we know that it has been part of the education in al-Azhar. So 2 million people are studying this declaration, and this is a step in the right way, because the education can change the mentality, can change the culture. And Human Fraternity Declaration is part of the program of the Azhar, and we spoke about the Pope in the Azhar. This is a real huge change, and I think that it will be meaningful even for the future. And there are several states that started to include the Human Fraternity Declaration within their school programs, for example, in Liberia, in the Arabic Emirates, in the universities, and even in the public schools. I think that education is the main route to and is the healthy way to work for the coexistence and fraternity.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Salam. Mr. Azoulay, you need to unmute yourself, Mr. Azoulay, please.
It's okay?
Yes, please
Yes,
go
sorry.
ahead.
Now, allow me to have maybe a different answer. I mean, dreaming of a full citizenship by our time means first to try to deal with a house which is burning. I mean, we can be, years before, the dream was maybe possible. But today we are confronted to a situation where extremism is gaining ground everywhere. Islamophobia is growing. Anti-Semitism is more and more, gaining ground. Christian minorities are under pressure in the Middle East and other places. So I think that we have first to try to give a chance to a counter dynamic, to make possible a revival of this old time where mutual respect was the common rule in our daily life. It's not the case anymore. So if we want to address the full citizenship, we have first to repair what was broken and spoiled. We cannot avoid this reality. And I think that full citizenship is something we have to keep in mind in the horizon. But first, to think how we can coordinate better, how we can work together differently, how we can unite our voices, our tools, our commitments, our policies, our leadership to rebuild what was damaged, and then give more chances to what we are discussing today. I mean, which I see as a virtual dream.
Thank you, Mr. Azoulay. Archbishop Avellin.
Thank you. About the shift from the status of religious minority to a full citizenship, I think that we can never be sure it will work out. For example, we have examples in the world who show both possibilities of a better protection or of a worse status that caused minorities to flee their home. Instead of saying if I am sure or not, I want to suggest to you to which conditions that this shift will be able to assure a better protection. It seems to me that these conditions are two. First, the goal of this shift must not be the survival of minorities, but a common life together in mutual respect and concrete cooperation. And so that each minority don't think only to his poor survivance, but to the society, the global society. And the second condition, this shift must not bring a leveling that evacuates differences by refusing alterity. If inclusive means the contrary of exclusive, it's okay. But if inclusive means erasing the differences, so it's not okay. The Jewish people can tell us and give us lessons about the importance of the difference. So we have to keep being cautious. For example, in France, we make the experience of laicity, which is positive to my eyes, but which can deviate into laicism that excludes every religious dimension of the cultural sphere and public sphere. And that is, for me, a point of attention. Inclusive citizenship is better than discrimination of minorities, but if inclusive citizenship means exclusion of religious dimension just in the private sphere, it's not a good thing. Thank you.
Merci. Thank you very much, Bishop Aveline. I think we had some very interesting exchange. I would just ask the Vice Minister, Emanuela Del Rey, for 1 minute of wisdom and conclusion before we turn to the second panel. And I know that my friend Fadi is looking at me really saying, you're late. I know. So Emanuela, please.
Wisdom is a bit too much to ask from me, actually. I can only share my opinions. Nevertheless, I found the discussion incredibly interesting, I have to say. Probably, you know, the connection between interreligious dialogue and citizenship is particularly relevant. I have to tell you that when I went to Lebanon recently to bring aid after the explosion, the blast, and I spoke to the local NGOs. Some of them I know since a very long time. The most important thing that was said to me by the youngsters especially is that we must move a step forward and therefore use interreligious dialogue to promote citizenship. And I think that in this sense, the responsibility grows even more. And I think that the most important thing is that we adopt the methodology that we have developed so far, the lessons learned, although imperfect, because I don't think that we have reached a complete understanding of what interreligious dialogue implies or in which way it must be declined in the different situations, so much that it should be contextualized, of course. Nevertheless, we have learned a lot, and probably now the new element that is emerging from the current situation is that we can, in fact, connect the two, citizenship and interreligious dialogue. And I think that this is a new challenge, and I think that we can actually bring it forward, and I think that there is a big opportunity for all of us to work together and make this become a proper articulated strategy that can really respond especially to the demands of the different minorities. Forgive me for using this word, but it is the conventional terminology that we adopt in all the documents and in the normal colloquial discussions. But and I think that in this way we can respond to the current demands. I think that we have reached an understanding of this. Thank you, Fabio, for promoting this discussion. I will also stay for the next panel because I'm interested. Don't ask me wisdom.
Thank you, Manuela. We need more ministers like you. And on the strength of this wise conclusion, I'll give the floor to my friend Fadi.
Thank you, Fabio, and all the panelists of the first panel. So it was so rich, and I know how much it's challenging to manage a panel in a short period of time where you have distinguished speakers as you had and as we will have now in this second panel, continuing the reflection. I would like just to also welcome and greet the more than 80 persons from 26 countries who are following this forum. So this is also, unfortunately, we are not seeing them, but they are there, they are following. And unfortunately, we are not hearing them. There is no space for debate also with the audience, but we want to tell them that we really appreciate their presence with us. Such a big audience, distinguished audience also from 26 different countries with us in this forum. I will welcome so the panelists in the second panel and apologize from the beginning to be more strict on time than the first panel to be sure that we will finish on time also. So we will do 2 rounds of discussion, and in each round we'll have not more than 4 minutes for each speaker. And let me straightforward welcome so our panelists and speakers in this panel. I don't see yet Professor Hassan Nazem, the Minister of Culture from Iraq. He appeared and then disappeared, but I'm sure the ISP team is working technically with him to bring him back to the panel. And Excellency Monsignor Paul Gallagher, the Secretary for Relations with States from the Holy See. Welcome, Excellency. Dr. Azza Karam, the Secretary General of Religions for Peace. Welcome, Dr. Azza. And Professor Alberto Melloni, Director of John 23rd Foundation for Religious Studies. Welcome also, dear Professor. And Excellency Mr. Miguel Angel Moratinos, the High Representative for the United Nations Alliance of Civilizations. Welcome too, and good morning, probably, if you are in New York. So let me straightforward say that continuing the discussion of the first panel, I think the audience and all of us agree that we are not here to say that everything is fine, everything is beautiful, and so we can easily be together from religious and political and academic backgrounds and civil societies just to celebrate this. We are here, I think, to acknowledge that there are also challenges and very difficult challenges, and at the same time to share that our strong will also and willingness to collaborate together and to put all of our efforts together to overcome those challenges. And this is why the topic of the second panel is about religion and inclusive citizenship in the Euromed space. And we know how much the space of Euromed, so the European space, the Middle Eastern or the MENA region also space, how much they faced, and they showed that it is being challenging to really establish citizenship that is inclusive, as Monsignor Ablin were saying, inclusive in the meaning that embracing the diversities and not making the diversity disappear from the social fabric and context. So the challenge for us is, are we today at a crossroad where the political search for a new social contract, we hear about this all the time, it's in the discussion. I mean, we need to rethink our societies politically speaking, but at the same time, there is also other voices who are speaking and loudly discussing together about a new interreligious engagement. Again, I'm quoting again Monsignor Ablin, who did a beautiful kind of chronological interpretation of dialogue, and then he said it's more logical than chronological, combining these 3 F of faith, freedom, and fraternity together. So this kind of new interreligious engagement that we are looking for, is it crossing also the political search for a new social contract? And do they cross each other on the crossroads that we can call inclusive citizenship? So this is, let's try to think together about these questions in the second panel. And let me directly start with Monsignor Gallagher. Monsignor, texts such the Human Fraternity document and the Fratelli Tutti, I mean the more recent beautiful encyclical also. So these texts are promoting strong new narrative about social, religious, and interreligious friendship and engagement. what impact has this had on the diplomacy of the Holy See? We can question. How does call for inclusive citizenship resonate in the current cross-Mediterranean relations from your points of view in Rome? The floor is yours, Monsignor.
Thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to participate this afternoon in this dialogue. I certainly cannot present the same excuse as Monsignor Aveline, who said that his English was poor, so he was going to read something. His English is actually much better than he thinks. But I too am going to read something, and then maybe out of that develop something. I ask your indulgence. The voice of the Holy See seeks to make itself heard at multiple levels and on various occasions. It can be said that the diplomatic activity of the Vatican is not limited only to the diplomatic level, strictly speaking, but extends also to the interreligious and humanitarian levels, according with its proper spiritual nature and mission. The concerns and priorities expressed in the above-mentioned documents continues to inspire and offer the guidelines of the Holy See's action, as underlined by Cardinal Parolin, the Secretary of State, during the press conference for the presentation of Fratelli Tutti. I quote, "The encyclical not only considers fraternity as an instrument or an ideal, it outlines a culture of fraternity to be applied in international relations that can contribute to the renewal of principles guiding international life, inspire the guidelines necessary for facing new challenges, and lead the plurality of actors working at a global level to respond to the needs of the human family." And he continues, "To the leaders of nations, to diplomats, to those who work for peace and development, fraternity proposes the transformation of international life from mere living side by side, coexistence, almost necessary, to a dimension based on that common sense of humanity that already now inspires and supports so many international rules and structures, thus promoting effective coexistence." End of quotation. It is exactly the social cohesion and peaceful coexistence that are being increasingly challenged on both shores of the Mediterranean. As you mentioned at the beginning, the Holy See is one among a number of actors seeking to address the causes of these current conflicts and working to promote a new narrative of fraternity. In the context of the region presently under discussion, these two concepts are given special relevance in the diplomatic activity of the Holy See. Intimately related to them is the fundamental question of equal citizenship among all members of society. I now move on to this pressing question. In a recent research paper, Leaving No One Behind Towards Inclusive Citizenship in Arab Countries, published by the United Nations Development Programme in 2019, it is underlined that achieving the Sustainable Development Goals in Arab countries requires addressing the most debilitating development problems related to citizenship in a region where the relations between the state and society remain deeply fraught and contested among political, social, and economic fragility. End of the quotation. Promoting and defending equal citizenship remains a crucial instrument for solving many of the problems that are plaguing the countries of the Euromed area. It is the firm conviction of the Holy See that strengthening and respecting the law on equal citizenship in the various countries of the region, regardless of ethnicity, race, religious affiliation, or nationality, can ensure the basis on which to build peaceful coexistence between the various components of society. The law must equally and unequivocally guarantee every citizen's human rights, among which is the right to freedom of religion and conscience, which involves the right to change freely one's religion without suffering discrimination, persecution, or being punished by death. A properly functioning state that works for the common good is a prerequisite for protecting religious minorities and ensuring their future. This theme was underscored in the document on human fraternity for world peace and common coexistence signed on the 4th of February 2019 in Abu Dhabi by Pope Francis and the Grand Imam of al-Azhar, Ahmad al-Tayyeb, where it was reiterated, it is therefore crucial to establish in our societies the concept of full citizenship and to reject the discriminating use of the term minorities. which engenders feelings of isolation and inferiority. Its misuse paves the way for hostility and discord. It undoes any success and takes away the religious and civil rights of some citizens who are thus discriminated against. Pope Francis resumes and accentuates the same concept of full citizenship in chapter 4 of Fratelli Tutti, whose application paves the way for social cohesion and peaceful coexistence, leaving no one behind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monseigneur, for this first statement, very clear on the topic. I think in the second round, definitely we can discuss more. And you know, the challenge today for people is asking how this extremely important and beautiful narrative, I mean, this shift in the narrative, in the religious narrative towards fraternity, how it cannot be perceived as a kind of emotional engagement, and it has also political implications. And I think this would be extremely important to discuss it with you in the second round. Second round of our discussion. Let me now give the floor to Dr. Karam, Azza Karam. You are leading one of the largest organizations working on a daily basis for interreligious engagement and for peace in the world. So many examples can be given from the activities of Religions for Peace. Let me ask you, how can this engagement be a driver for inclusive citizenship, and more specifically in the Mediterranean area that you know very well also from your own background?
Well, first of all, thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to be here with such a distinguished panel of thinkers, intellectuals, speakers, and actors. I am incredibly impressed with what I've heard so far and very grateful to have an opportunity to provide a couple of humble contributions, largely based on the work of Religions for Peace, which has a 5-decade-long experience of not just having the interreligious dialogue, but actually what we refer to as dia-praxis, which means dialogue in actual service to communities through very concrete programs and initiatives, which target education, health, peacemaking, peace building, environmental concerns, etc. So we go beyond the conversation and the dialogue itself to implement the fruits of that trust that has been established between the different religious institutions and communities, very pragmatically, very practically, into service to communities in need. So this is the ethos of Religions for Peace. We were extremely privileged to be able to have the religious institutions, all the world's religious institutions represented, sitting on the governance of this entity in the same way that member states sit on the United Nations. Religious institutions sit on Religions for Peace's infrastructure and governance capacities. Also, at the national level, there are 92 interreligious structures that, again, build on and harvest a significant interreligious dialogue and channel it into very concrete initiatives that serve communities. So the leadership we speak of in Religions for Peace, which I think is very pertinent to the notion of citizenship, the leadership that we speak of is not a leadership only of titles within religious institutions or religious networks, but it is a leadership manifested through service to communities in very pragmatic, programmatic initiatives and actions. Given this particular legacy of 5 decades of working interreligiously or multi-religiously, there's a couple of very concrete things to be able to share with you. One of those, especially now that we have undergone almost a year of complexities arising from a global pandemic, the citizenship in action, citizenship not just as the duty bearers of a state trying to ensure that laws are inclusive, but citizenship also as exemplified by multi-religious advocacy and engagement to claim, to realize what it means to be citizens in a context. So citizenship not just per law, but through actions of different citizens as as instructed, as engaged, as facilitated by religious actors who are serving different members of a community, people who are there, migrants, refugees, internally displaced, through serving these various communities, realizing a citizenship that may not even correspond to the existing legislation. So whereas existing laws say citizens are those who are born in this country, who have this, with and through the work of religious organizations serving migrants and refugees, they become de facto citizens of that territory. I think we need to be very conscious of the fact that what religious communities do when they work together is they manage to create a status quo that is much more inclusive than the laws and legislation of a particular nation state. And this reality presents us with a very different understanding of what it is to realize citizenship in practice. And it's extraordinarily critical at a time when we're talking about the largest numbers of refugees and internally displaced people ever in human history as we've known it, since we've started to track nation states and people in and people out. Given this particular reality, we are talking about a contribution of multi-religious collaboration in action that effectively exceeds the existing legislative capacities, that challenges the legislation as we have it today, whether governmental or intergovernmental, through the act of multi-religious service and care extended to various communities in that particular national, regional, and global context. So I wanted to make sure we're absolutely aware of this particular dynamic, Dr. Dio, because I think this is something we don't normally hear about. Citizenship as enacted, as made possible through the participation, the welfare, and through the service of multi-religious actors coming together. Now, this is a reality that I think is very important to keep in mind. But what is COVID also teaching us? COVID is teaching us something that I would have hoped never to learn, which is that we would assume, given this particular reality of welcoming the stranger, that religious actors serve and realize and therefore enable an alternative form of citizenship. But given this reality, you would assume that COVID would have forced an almost fast forwarding of more collaboration between different religious communities and organizations in order to absorb the huge need that COVID has now imposed on everybody, citizen, migrant, refugee, you name it. Interestingly, however, COVID has indeed fast forwarded the fact that religious institutions and religious NGOs, who are humanitarian and the original development actors and humanitarian actors, COVID has indeed fast forwarded this, so that we see a great many organizations serving not out of the luxury of being able to serve, but because actually governments are unable to fully serve the needs of their respective citizens, which have now risen exponentially. So religious actors are there at the forefront and the first responders to the massive increase in need that is happening. But are they working together? Are these religious institutions and religious NGOs working together? I can tell you without a shadow of doubt, very, very rarely. The different religious institutions are each doing tremendous work and serving everyone. They're not distinguishing necessarily between the different communities, religious communities, but they are not deliberately working together. Catholic, Muslim, Protestant, Shia, Sunnah, Buddhist, Hindu, they are not working together. They are each serving exponentially, amazingly, but they are not necessarily working together. Why is that relevant? It is relevant because we've just said, if the religious contribution and through service to communities is actually expanding the scope of citizenship to make it much more inclusive in service, then what does it mean when different religious actors are working solely in siloed ways to serve communities? It means that we are looking at a much more stronger religious presence in the public, social, economic, financial, etc., political space, but we are not looking at a multi-religious collaborative existence that can truly build social cohesion. We are not looking at an inclusive, socially cohesive reality. We are looking at a precipice. We're at the edge of a precipice where we're looking at different forms of religions serving communities. I don't think that's a necessarily very helpful space to be, and I intentionally and deliberately am provoking us to think about what that could imply, because we are not, as religious actors, working together. What will that mean for a citizenship, a citizenry that sees different religious actors serving it in different ways, but not working together as one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Azza. Thank you. It's so interesting and challenging, the question that you leave us with, and hopefully for the second round we can discuss it all together. Definitely this is a big question. If the service is meant to enforce and foster identity-based action, or if the service as common service done together is meant to foster citizenship in action, as you said, and so becoming inclusive. Definitely this is a crucial question that we should address to all our communities here. Hopefully in the second round, we can continue this discussion on this point. Now, let me turn to Professor Alberto Melloni. Professor Melloni, do we need to redefine, while we are speaking, from a religious perspective or political one, do you need today to redefine the boundaries between religious and political engagement? Based on what we just heard, for example, does a religiously sensitive model of inclusive citizenship pose a challenge for a post-secular or post-nationalist Europe, or not only in Europe, let's say? I know how much you are you work on these issues, so let us hear your views on this point, please. You are mute, Professor. If you can unmute yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me, and thank you for the discussion that we have today. I must confess that there are some moments in which I'm very happy to be European, so belonging to a union in which citizenship is not a gift but a right. I'm very happy to live in a country who has elaborated his fascist past, defining human rights as something that is discarded from citizenship and something belonging to the human being as such, using a French personalism in order to write something that was a model of religious freedom and the relation between religious experience and civil rights and civil values that is not defined but very helpful in many circumstances. Even now, in which the change of the religious landscape is asking to us sometime to find solution, and is urging us sometimes to find too quickly a way out from the danger. I will take the division of logical, chronological steps mentioned by Monsignor Aveline, because I see that there is also another possibility, a bit more pessimistic, to read the same path. Namely, at least for the Roman Catholic Church, it was mandatory after Vatican II and after Paul VI to think in terms of dialogue and mediation. And dialogue and mediation were helpful to make a first step, but it was definitely not the final one. We had a second wave, so to say, mostly in theology, less in the magisterium, to find out a sort of secular theology, a sort of reduction of religion to a different content of what they've been called values, and not simply principle. And this too was helpful, but not enough. And now we have the issue of brotherhood, that at least for the reader of the Bible is a very delicate and fragile concept, because brotherhood, it is the womb of the first crime of history. And religious brotherhood was the hum of the first crime. And so we are Fratelli Tutti of Cain and Fratelli Tutti of Abel. And so both brotherhoods are very important, and both brotherhoods are very delicate to be managed. And so my opinion is that even the concept of citizenship is useful, but it is to be considered as a tool and as an instrument, and not as a goal. And what I hope is that in this year that we are waiting for, 2021 with the G20 interfaith, with the Dubai Expo opportunity, with all the initiatives that have been taken by the different players in this field, we can consider interreligious relation and cohabitation of different faiths and cohabitation between faith and rejection of faith, between transition from a faith to another, or to the continent of the no religion to the John Lennon continent. And well, that we may consider this as an opportunity to use and revise these instruments. And also one instrument that for me, it's very important that we close because we have 4 minutes, that is the instrument of knowledge. I think that knowledge, acknowledgement, to be known, are the aspiration of religious and non-religious communities. And if I can put it in a very medieval and Italian terms, the problem is how large is the square? There is a model that says that if you have a large and immense place de la laïcité, keeping people from one far from the other one, this is the best solution, and only the Republican values can cross place de la laïcité from one corner to the other. And I'm speaking from Bologna. We call Piazza Grande a very small square, in which the common, the cathedral, the prison of the enemies are all in the same area. And this is a sort of urbanistic way to depict a perspective that could be helpful, I think, in this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Alberto Meloni. I think you brought in your conclusion a crucial point. I would call it the public sphere, and how much I think not only citizenship but religions themselves need, and this is an essential, I think, framework for any engagement, either citizenship or religious or interreligious engagement, to accept to be together in a public sphere, in a Piazza Grande, regardless its dimensions, because such a dimension is freedom, no, and openness and readiness to collaborate. So thank you so much. And now I turn to Excellency Mr. Miguel Angel Moratinos. With your diplomatic experience and your now UN also experience as High Representative of UNAOC, do you think that inclusive citizenship could represent a means for us to avoid new clash of civilizations, or maybe better to say today, clash of radicalizations, either religious or secular or any type of radicalization? Floor is yours, Mr. Moratinos.
Well, thank you very much. Good morning from New York, and I have a thought of last year. I was the chance to be invited by the Italian government and the foreign minister, and well, 1 year later we are, due to COVID-19, seeing each other through this virtual instrument. But nevertheless, let me express to Emanuela Del Rey all my thanks, all my privilege to be and share with all of you, distinguished panelists. I'm the last one, I think, after 11 personalities taking the floor. I was asking myself what I'm going to add, because everything has been said. But from my point of view, there is always the time, and I see so many friends, Andre, Azakaram, so very good friends at Depsalan, that they know me, and they are waiting for some new, let's say, front or avenues to include in this very interesting conversation. Let us start by saying that today is the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona Declaration. And so I was there. It was, I think, a diplomatic breakthrough. Well, where we are today, I think we have to be, let's say, objective in our analysis and trying to see there was a being positive development, negative development, of course, As my friend Andres say, we have this denial moment, of gloomy moment of our living together. And I think, well, 25 years ago, my dear friends, and I want to congratulate the Italian government to have this panel today, we didn't include the religious dimension. I mean, the three main baskets, remember, and then Andre was the leader on this Annalyn Foundation. We have the political security, the economic and financial, and the cultural social. But at that time, we didn't really conceive that the religion dimension should be part of, inverted commas, the Mediterranean diplomacy. Today, Italy has taken the lead. I'm very, very happy about that, to include in this Med 2020 the issue. It's a novelty. I think it's the first time in a kind of multilateral framework at the same level of the crisis and hot conflict, Syria, Libya. We had 2 hours of discussion about how religion can contribute to peace and stability in our area of peace in the Mediterranean. So thank you very much for including that. Secondly, the debate between politics and religion has been around history of humankind. But in what we consider the Western world, or European democracies, after Nietzsche said God is dead, while we became all secular. Laicism have prevailed. And of course, I'm a secular man. I have my Catholic faith myself, but I respect all the democracies have, of course, the division between state and religion in France and in the law of 1905. And there is no discussion about that. But today's event and what we have been, unfortunately, been in France with this horrible attack, terrorist attack, and I have the opportunity, to share my sympathy, my support to Archbishop Jean-Marc Cavelin, and of course to the French people, have made even more confusing the debate. Let's be frank. Today there is a tremendous confusion, a tremendous amalgam. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, laicism, equal, inclusive citizenship, minorities. Where we go? Where is the guidelines that we have to really go ahead? I was quite inspired by the Holiness Pope Francis, not only about the Human Fraternity, not only about the Fratelli Tutti, that I recommend really to read. I know it's 75 pages, and people say, don't read the 75 pages. But you have seen, it's not a criticism, it's the contrary, that when the Pope Francis published the Laudatio Si, he get a tremendous impact. With Fratelli Tutti, we today here, the 11 personalities, we are discussing about it. But there is, the media have not taken that. And I think Naya Tabara was right to say there is a lack of debate, knowledge, and understanding of what is Fratelli Tutti. If you read Fratelli Tutti, if you read other speeches in some European countries about it's a total opposed approach. Fratelli Tutti is being together. Others are looking for separatism, division, and exclusion. And so we have really to recuperate, the guidance. And the Pope, in the 5th anniversary between the diplomatic relation, I think we have Cardinal Paul Gallagher between the European institution and the Holy See. I think I'm memorizing myself, Mr. Gallagher, that he says something, I dream of a Europe marked by a healthy secularism, where God and Caesar remain distinct but not opposed, and that the war of conventional conflict are over, but also we have to come to an age of a certain new laicism. I'm, of course, in favor of laicism, but not fundamentalist laicism, because we talk about the fundamentalism in religion, but sometimes we should talk also about fundamentalism and secularism. So, my friend, where we are, I know that we don't have 4 minutes. You know, to invite somebody else only to talk 4 minutes is a kind of provocation, you know. So I will try to be even more short now. Where we are in a world where these two components of secularism and religious aspect are in a relationship. And I think the last move of the way spiritualism is part of the political debate is a sign that something is moving forward. What I said, and I have the chance to be last year in Lindau, we was invited by the Religions of Peace, and I said that spirituality is back in Europe. So it doesn't mean that we should have a theological countries in Europe. But what we have is to recognize that there is an important place for spiritual sensitivity in our society. And the decision makers that don't understand that, they will not be able to rule adequately their countries. So they have to understand that there is a multi-pluralism, as Monsignor Torrent, he was quoted, it was my, of course, inspiring personality when I was in the Middle East. Well, this pluralism of religions is part of our society today. So how we are going to live together? So as I have not too much time now, I have to refrain some of my ideas. Let's only concentrate on one comment, and then I pass the word for the moderator. We have been discussing about this concept of citizenship. I'm absolutely in favor of that. I think what has happened in France, for instance, is not a question of a contradiction between religion and the freedom of speech. Freedom of speech, of course, Article 19 of the Universal Human Rights Declaration, but the freedom of religion and conscience, Article 18. So tell me, what is better, 18 or 19? We are going to prevail 19 because of freedom of speech, but the other one we put aside, or we have indivisibility of human rights Universal Declaration. Why nobody talk about that? They are interrelated. They are together. So we are not be able to have a real free expression if we have what I said, a freedom of hate. It's no freedom of expression, it's freedom of hate. So we have to work in order that this citizenship, the citizens have the rights. And Article 18, Article 19, each country have the right. And the justice have to judge if the defamation is an insult, is provocation, incentive to violence, and to judge them. So for that we need citizenship, rights of the citizens at the equal footing. And minorities, my friends, are not my, let's say, cup of tea. Because I think, and with that I conclude, I think we decision maker, even academician, even philosopher, even religious people, we have to start to change not only the narrative, but our language, how we express ourselves. And I think the one who are working for fraternity, we have to change from a negative concept to a positive concept. let me say, in front of minority, defend citizenship. Instead of coexistence, because of course we have to coexist, I have to coexist with my neighbor, let's work for living together. Instead of tolerance, that is a negative concept, let's work for mutual respect. Instead of dialogue, it's not only enough, let's work with alliance. That is what I represent. What is the difference of the dialogue of culture, religion with alliance of civilization? Because alliance is something that Andre was saying, we have to commit ourselves, all of us have to commit for a better world. And finally, we have to have, instead of security, let's have peace. Because without peace, you cannot never attain security. So that is the responsibility we should try to start to work. And then, of course, I have other elements about the work of the UNOSC, but I will let you for the second round. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moratinos. It's really challenging what you shared with us from different perspectives, and also so enlightening for our discussion. I liked so much your insistence on the recognition, as Professor Melloni was talking about knowledge and acknowledgement. I think this is a key concept of recognition, being recognized and being acknowledged. I think this is a starting point in building social cohesion and societies, and this no right for freedom of hate, and how to face this while preserving freedom of speech and freedom of religion and belief. So thank you so much. Let me start the second round, maybe directly with you, by asking you, because the second round will be very brief, I mean, very short statement, 1 minute, 2 minutes maximum, asking you in 2 minutes, concretely, can you tell us what do you expect from religious leaders and political leaders? You mentioned that in Barcelona process missed to include religions. So today you are happy to see it here. What you would request very practically from leaders, political and religious, what they have to do together today in the Mediterranean region, from the MENA region and Europe?
I was quite optimistic during the last 2 years, and I think Monsignor Jean-Marc Avelin described the 3 shifts, no? And I think I fully agree with him. And when I was mandated to prepare the UN plan of safeguarding religious sites, I traveled around the world. I met all the high-level religious personalities, and I found for the first time the sense of working together. Before there was some attempt, there was good conferences where the religious leaders interchanged, they were of course showing sympathy. But since the Human Fraternity engagement from His Holiness Pope Francis and the Grand Imam al-Azhar, al-Tayyeb, I think things have changed. And now we were going to try to have a positive agenda, not waiting for a terrorist attack to show solidarity and go and yes, show compassion with the other. No, the question is how in any circumstances, even COVID or without COVID, religious leaders start to work together in order to create this, let's say, mutual respect environment. So to respond, we have to introduce meetings, but not only among religious leaders, we have to have this multidisciplinary, let's say, methodology. Is what I think the Pope and Grand Imam al-Azhar, what the United Nations Alliance of Civilization is trying to do. You can meet, but you have to meet together with political personality, with the civil society organization, with media, with the private sector, in order that everybody contribute and understand what should be done. I think we have to go a step forward and eliminating this sense of separatism. I mean, what I plea is for working together. Separatism, when you already have, we have to fight communitarism. what is in France, what is happening is that they are already separated. So we don't want to separate even more. So we want to really engage all of us in order to fight the barbarian, the extremists, the violent people. So I think with a global and interactive dialogue at this level with all the stakeholders, I think it would be much better.
Marvelous. I would say, if you allow me, Mr. Martins, this is a beautiful political preaching. It has a religious sense and at the same time the strength of a political call. So thank you so much. And Professor Melloni, I know you will have a leadership role in preparing the G20 Interface Forum. So starting just the G20 happened in Saudi Arabia next year, you will be hosting it in Italy. You will have a major role in this. So practically speaking, maybe is this interface forum of G20 or any other maybe platform? Because hearing Mr. Moratinos, I was thinking as he was like calling us to keep, you know, this discussion ongoing and going beyond the discussion itself. So what do you expect? What you from your perspective on this collaboration level?
Well, the Italian presidency of the G20 will offer, I think, a good opportunity to introduce in the issue of interreligious dialogue, interfaith encounter, some points concerning what is the peculiar experience of this country in the G20, and the fact that the G20 is a place in which believers of the worldwide denomination and faith may represent the voice of the voiceless in front of the G20 and the powerful 21s. And so it is a moment in which what we do hope to have is a moment to offer a possibility to represent possibly in a very small document, in a parva carta, what is the result of the effort that has been done in the past years. Maybe the Ambassador Azulay do remember the effort we made about the issue of forgiveness and the consciousness of the evil that is inside each tradition around the year 2000 after the mea culpa of John Paul II in the Jubilee year, and the opportunity that this could be the platform for offering a real commitment that could be promising for future generations.
Thank you. Beautifully said. And this, if the Interfaith Forum can be the voice of the voiceless within the G20, this would be definitely a prophetic testimony from religions, you know, to bring this voice to the decision makers. Thank you so much, Professor Melloni. I see, and I have to say that I know the office of Dr. Hassan Nazem, the Minister of Culture in Baghdad, they were struggling during the last hour with some internet challenges there to bring him back. And I'm seeing that up, and he disappeared. I was thinking that he's appearing now. Maybe we'll see if he will be able to connect again with us. We'll maybe extend for a few minutes our panel to also hear his voice from Baghdad. But now, Dr. Karam, I know that Religions for Peace is striving also and is already present in the MENA region in different ways. But I know that you would like to have a more maybe proactive and stronger presence. So what do you wish for the region and for the interreligious engagement in the region and with Europe, of course?
Well, the Middle East has been one of those regions where even when things are not religious, they somehow get to be tainted with and as religion and religious. So heaven knows we do a very good job anyway in the Middle East of making sure that religion is very much part of the equation. But even if it isn't, and it is a purely political resource issue, it somehow gets to become known as a religious issue. So I think given that we have this particular characteristic in the region that I'm deeply proud to be part of, I think we have to acknowledge that multi-religious collaboration has to be the moral imperative in this space. You know, even if religious actors are the ones who seem to be the source of all trouble and all issues and all oppression and all subordination and terrorism and violence and radicalization and precisely because this is a legacy, a heritage, and a stereotype, it behooves religious actors in their diversity, not just religious institutions, but religious actors in their diversity, to collaborate towards a common set of purposes. Again, COVID has given us a blight. We already have serious water shortage in the region. Our wars are ongoing in the Middle East. If the political leaders do not appear to be able to overcome the multiple boundaries that we have, and we have serious boundaries, but since the political leaders appear, and I'm being very diplomatic here, appear not to be able to solely overcome some of these boundaries, it behooves the religious actors, institutions, leaders, NGOs, to present an alternative to the political space. This does not mean religious leaders should become more political, because that is exactly the beginning of the end. But instead, religious leaders and their institutions and their NGOs and their communities need to provide an alternative to what we are seeing as the wasteland of conflict that is also the nurturing space for the world's largest monotheistic religions. I would call upon the religious leaders and their institutions in the region to model the prophetic alternative in praxis, since they are anyway already serving their communities remarkably. Can they model an alternative social coexistence? Globally, however, it appears to me that the multi-religious imperative is a key to change. It's no longer us discussing, as Dr. Moratinos made very clear, it's not just about religion being important. We've always known that religion is important, by the way, but welcome to the Western European hemisphere that has finally woken up to that particular coffee. The truth here is that it's the multi-religious dimension that will make or break, that will break a pattern that we have historically, where religions and politicians have worked in tandem and have hurt and done a great deal of harm over the years. We have to not repeat that pattern. To not repeat that pattern, we invite and insist that the multi-religious, so that no one religion has primacy, priority, and the incredible knowledge of all and the only link to the real true God. But in fact, when it's a multi-religious collaborative platform, we understand, we appreciate, we genuinely see the divine in one another. Multi-religious has to be our modus operandi, has to be what religious institutions, no matter how powerful they are. And that is fundamentally the message of Fratelli Tutti. That is fundamentally the same message. You know, it's not saying that we have to be better Catholics per se. It doesn't stop there. It says that we have to be brothers to one another across our differences, in spite of our differences. The multi-religious imperative is and has to be our way forward to model a social cohesion that strengthens our civil society infrastructure. States, governments are facing their worst nightmare, institutionally, morally, legally, ever. So we cannot insist that states have to now behave better. What we can do is model an alternative civic infrastructure, and we can insist that our multi-religious actors model that and provide a model for that. If the multi-religious can make a stronger civic space, then we will get through this entire drama that we are only beginning to confront with COVID. COVID is but the beginning. There are many more challenges that we will confront, humanitarian in nature. If the multi-religious, socially cohesive, civic engagement can provide all with an alternative modality of social cohesion, we will, God willing, inshallah, build back better. But if we fall into the political entrapment of looking at our distinctiveness and seeing who's more important and which organization is better, then we will get absolutely nowhere really fast. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Azza Karam. I really want to salute your courage. It's rare to see a leader challenging his own constituency in this way, I would say, because we would see your agenda here with Religions for Peace, hearing you like this and guessing how much this would be challenging and at the same time important for the credibility the interreligious or multi-religious collaborations that you were sharing with us. So thanks you so much. Monsignor Gallagher, so what would be the next surprise coming from Pope Francis or from the Holy See, engaging on this social, that he called social friendship in the Fratelli Tutti? Or, I mean, from your way, how you would see further practical, concrete collaboration to make things move for the best?
Well, perhaps I'll put that question to the Pope in about 55 minutes' time, see what he says. So maybe I have to come back to you. But I think, shall we say, the direction will be maintained. There's no doubt that there is a very strong connection between Laudato Si and Fratelli Tutti. Laudato Si facing up to a very concrete problem, showing that there is a need for a global response. Fratelli Tutti, in some ways, giving us the encouragement and some of the means to move forward on that. And I'm sure that the Pope is going to continue in that way. I'd like to second many of the things that Dr. Karam said, which was put both in a very forceful way and a remarkable way. I think that we have to say that the advantage of the Mediterranean region has been that religion has always been a significant part of the life of the peoples. And this has not been the case in other parts of the world. And as the doctor says, some of these are now waking up to this and recognizing their own religious illiteracy, and therefore not having even the linguistic tools to engage with people of faith around the world. What I think that is called for, coming back to the political argument, is that we do have to get religious leaders and politicians, not so much as possibly providing alternatives to existing policy, but rather freshly looking at the problems of the world. And that's quite right to say that the pandemic is the tip of the iceberg, probably, for humanity in coming decades. So I think we need to get that cooperation going, and where there is a true recognition of the richness of the spiritual traditions, what they can contribute to political discourse, and also the need for religious leaders to realize that being part of such a dialogue, a discourse, into which we come through citizenship, there comes with it an enormous responsibility as well. That this is if you are committing yourself to this sort of engagement, then we have to try and also struggle with the negative stereotypes that have arisen in recent decades concerning almost everything religious, and trying to bring some freshness and a spirit of that religion is part of the solution and not part of the problem. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monsignor. This is, I mean, I think all the audience share with me the desire to continue this discussion and not to stop here, because it's so much interesting and really opening also our eyes to different perspectives on this crucial issue. I'm really happy that ROMED 2020 did this decision to include this forum in this year's edition of this prestigious political dialogue, and to have this forum straightforward after the opening of this session this year. This is, I think, by itself a strong symbol. What I just, it's not a conclusion, but what I keep from what we heard from the first and the second panel, I think the word boundaries, borders or boundaries was crucial. And for my own surprise, I was noting that, okay, this means that we should not remove boundaries, should keep boundaries to preserve diversity and to preserve the difference between religion and politics, or even between different religions between each other. But rather than making these boundaries closed, to make them open boundaries. So recognizing, acknowledging the diversity and the distinction between religion and politics, and between even religious communities, but with open boundaries for common engagement, for civic and citizenship collaboration and engagement for the common good of the humanity and the common public sphere that should unite us all together. So let me, with this, thank you so much. The panelists for the first panel who stayed with us. I know how much your time is precious, and also the panelists of the second panel. Unfortunately, I saw that Minister Nazem was struggling with his internet connection in Baghdad, and this is another also, I think, challenge to keep in mind, how much sometimes there are new, I would say, challenges in poverty in some countries where internet becomes, or internet illiteracy or religious illiteracy can be forms also of poverty that we need to tackle together. Let me thank those who made this possible today. Of course, the Italian Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation, and thank you, Vice Minister Del Rey, also having stayed with us during all this forum and did the opening speech for it. With ISPI, of course, the organizer of this, with the whole team of ISPI, especially let me thank Serena, Antonella, and Caterina, and all the team who collaborated and worked very hard, and of course the translators, the technical people who allowed this to happen. Let me thank my colleague, Dr. Fabio Petito, who is la tête pensante, who really worked very hard to bring us together in this intellectual framework. And together with Dr. Michael Dreesen and a group of also scholars, we will continue this discussion into a publication, and hopefully also with other opportunities and the platform where we can continue together this discussion. And Adyan Foundation, I have to say also thank you to all the team who contributed also from Adyan to make this also possible. So thank you so much. Thank you for the audience who also followed us today, and see you maybe in Med 2021 or before in any other opportunity to continue our collaboration.
Thank you. Bye. Ciao.
Merci.